Ethan had always loved his little apartment because it felt safe. The kind of safety that comes from locked doors, familiar smells, and the quiet hum of the city at night. He was a simple man, worked a desk job, read too much sci-fi, and spent his evenings cooking small meals while listening to old music. Tonight was no different. He locked his door, double-checked the bolt, and sighed with satisfaction. Alone. Finally alone. He had been living alone for years, enjoying the solitude that most people feared. There was freedom in silence, in knowing that the world outside couldn't reach him without his permission. He sank into his bed, the soft mattress welcoming him like an old friend. His eyelids grew heavy, thoughts melting into dreams, and the city noises faded into a gentle lullaby. For a while, Ethan felt that perfect peace. Then somewhere in the middle of the night, he felt it, a faint shift in the bed. He opened his eyes slowly, thinking maybe he had been dreaming. But the air felt different, charged, heavy, almost alive. He froze. Every rational part of his brain screamed that it was impossible, that nothing could be in his apartment without him noticing. Yet the weight on the other side of the bed was real. When his eyes adjusted to the faint moonlight spilling through the blinds, he saw her. She was sitting upright, knees drawn to her chest, with long, flowing hair that shimmered like silver under the dim light. Her skin had a strange, subtle glow, almost transparent but warm, almost human. Her eyes were the first thing he noticed, enormous, dark, with flecks of gold, staring at him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. Ethan's brain refused to form words. He was frozen, a statue of shock. The rational part of him, the part trained to think logically, shouted, "She can't be here. I locked the door. I'm not dreaming. She's not real." Yet every instinct told him that she was, real, present, breathing. Finally, his voice came out, barely a whisper. "Who are you?" She tilted her head, a small, almost shy smile appearing. Her voice was soft, melodic, yet impossible. I am called Neighbour." Her accent was strange, melodic, like someone had sung every word before speaking it. "I think you let me in." Ethan blinked, trying to process the impossible. He knew he hadn't let anyone in. He had checked the locks. He had seen the empty hallway. Panic began to creep in, cold and sharp. No, you didn't. How did you get in?" Neera's smile faded, replaced by something unreadable. She looked small suddenly, fragile almost, like a lost child who had wandered too far from home. "I did not want to frighten you. I only needed a place to rest." Her hands rested on her knees. They were delicate, long-fingered, and pale against the dark sheets. She seemed human, but not. The feeling in the room shifted. Fear and wonder collided, and Ethan couldn't look away. He wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to wake up from this nightmare, but some part of him, the part that had always loved the stars, the part that had dreamed about other worlds, hesitated. She wasn't threatening him, not really. There was something in her gaze that was gentle, pleading, something that made him remember his childhood fascination with the universe, with beings beyond Earth. He swallowed hard. You can't just stay here. I mean, this is my home." His voice was trembling now, a mix of fear and disbelief. "I do not know your customs," she admitted quietly, her voice trembling slightly too. "In my world we share. I did not mean disrespect." She shifted, hugging her knees closer, looking almost ashamed. "I sleep where I am safe, and you are safe." Ethan's rational mind wanted to reject her, to call authorities, to insist that this was impossible and dangerous. But the truth was, he didn't feel danger. Not exactly. He felt curiosity, awe, and a strange compassion. And beneath it all, a deep, unexpected loneliness that he had not admitted to himself in years. He looked at Neera, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time he felt the walls of his carefully built life cracking. He was alone, yes, but maybe not entirely. Maybe the universe had a way of reminding him that he wasn't supposed to be completely solitary. Maybe it had its own, strange sense of humor. "Fine," he whispered almost reluctantly. "You can stay for now, but tell me who you are, really." Neera's eyes softened, the tension in her shoulders easing. "I will try. I can tell you some things, but you must promise not to be afraid." Ethan nodded slowly, not knowing what he was promising, not knowing what the next hours or days would bring. But deep down, he knew something fundamental had changed. The universe, which had always seemed distant, cold, and empty, was suddenly right here, under his roof, in his bed, asking him to see it through another pair of eyes. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel entirely alone. The morning sun spilled through the blinds, painting stripes of light across Ethan's small apartment. He woke to silence at first, then the soft sound of breathing beside him. His heart skipped a beat, remembering the impossible visitor who had arrived in his bed the night before. For a moment he froze, expecting her to vanish like a dream. But she was there, sitting cross-legged, staring out the window, her silver hair catching the sunlight and scattering tiny prisms across the room. Ethan blinked and rubbed his eyes. "You didn't disappear?" he asked, his voice hoarse from last night's tension. Neera turned her head, her eyes shining like polished obsidian. "I do not disappear," she said softly, almost apologetically. "I sleep where it is safe, and this place is safe." Ethan swallowed, feeling a strange mix of relief and unease. He had spent years alone, guarding his little sanctuary, yet now that someone, or something, shared it with him, the apartment felt different. Smaller, yet alive, like it had been waiting for a presence other than his own. He got up, moving carefully around the bed, trying not to startle her. You don't even know how you got here, right?" His mind raced. There were no signs of a break-in, no strange keys, no footprints. The locks were intact. "I mean, the door was locked." Neera's expression darkened slightly, as if she were trying to choose words that didn't exist. "In my world, doors do not always mean walls. They are suggestions." She looked down at her hands. "I did not cross to hurt you, only to rest." Ethan nodded slowly, though he didn't fully understand. "Okay, rest. Fine, but you can't just wander my home like this. I need to know you're safe, and I need to be safe too." He realized he was speaking more calmly than he expected, the initial shock giving way to curiosity. Neera tilted her head, studying him as if weighing his sincerity. "Safety is important, I understand." She paused, then added quietly, "And loneliness, I see it in you." Ethan froze. Her words hit him harder than he expected. Loneliness wasn't something he shared lightly. He had built walls so high around himself that even his own reflection sometimes seemed like a stranger. Yet here she was, seeing him in ways no human had ever done. "Yeah," he admitted, the single word tasting strange and heavy. "I'm lonely." Neera's lips curved into a faint, almost sad smile. "Then we are alike." For a moment the apartment was silent except for the hum of the city outside. Ethan moved to the small kitchen and started boiling water for coffee, each movement deliberate, as if grounding himself in reality. He could feel her gaze on him, gentle but intense, and it made his pulse quicken. The air between them was quiet but charged, like the space just before a storm. Finally she spoke again. "I am not of this world, but I watch, I learn, I sometimes travel." Her voice was low, almost hesitant. "I did not choose your apartment specifically, it chose me, or perhaps I chose it without knowing why." Ethan leaned against the counter, gripping it to steady himself. "Travel, you mean through space?" Neera nodded. "Farther than you imagine, I have seen stars die, I have seen worlds awake, but even in the vastness, sometimes, one only seeks a place to rest." She looked small, vulnerable almost, despite the otherworldly glow of her skin. "Even travelers need homes." Ethan found himself walking over, closing the distance between them. "So, you just appear in people's homes? That sounds dangerous." She shook her head quickly. "Not dangerous if both hearts understand." Her words were cryptic, and Ethan frowned, unsure whether she spoke in riddles or truth. "Do you understand me?" Ethan hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed, still careful to leave space. "I want to. I think I do, at least a little." His voice was quieter now, more honest than it had been in years. "I've always felt like something was missing, like I was just waiting. And maybe—" he trailed off, unsure of what he was about to say. Neera tilted her head again, her eyes soft. "Perhaps waiting is part of the journey. Perhaps some meetings are not accidents." The words hung in the room like sunlight caught in dust. Ethan felt a strange warmth in his chest, something between fear, awe, and hope. He had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten what it was like to trust someone completely. And yet here was someone, or something, asking him to share his world, to open his home, his life, and perhaps his heart. He looked at her, the silver strands of her hair shimmering like starlight, and made a choice he did not fully understand. "Then stay, for now." Neera's lips curved into the faintest smile, relief flickering in her eyes. "Thank you." And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt like the universe had stopped being cold and distant. It had entered his room, sat on his bed, and asked him to believe in something impossible. The day passed strangely in Ethan's apartment. Nira moved slowly, cautiously, as if she were learning the rules of a world that made no sense to her. She studied his small kitchen, the books stacked neatly on the shelf, even the tiny plants on the windowsill. Her eyes lingered on objects as if trying to understand their purpose. Ethan watched her silently, fascination mixing with unease. He had expected fear or hostility, yet she radiated neither. She radiated curiosity. "You have many things," she said finally, touching the edge of a book. "Why do you collect them?" Ethan chuckled softly, a sound he hadn't made in a long time. "I like to remember. Things tell stories. They make the world feel less lonely." Nira nodded slowly, her gaze thoughtful. "Memory is important. In my world, we do not always have it. We drift sometimes like seeds in wind." Her words carried a weight that made Ethan pause. "You remember. That is why you are here." He frowned, unsure if she meant him or herself. "I'm here because of memory." She shook her head almost imperceptibly. "No, because of heart. You feel, you wonder, you dream." She looked at him with those impossible eyes, and for a moment he felt exposed, stripped down to the very essence of who he was. He realized she could see his loneliness, his longing, and perhaps even the unspoken desire for something more in life. Ethan sat back on the couch, running a hand over his face. "You make it sound simple, but it isn't. Life is complicated." Nira tilted her head. "Perhaps, but you make it beautiful. Even small things, you notice them." She gestured toward the tiny plants, the carefully arranged books, the coffee mugs lined up like soldiers. "You care, that is rare." Her words warmed him, but they also made him feel painfully aware of the emptiness that had existed before her arrival. He realized that in years of solitude, he had not truly lived, only survived. And now, with her in his apartment, he felt the first hint of what it meant to connect. Later, as evening fell, Ethan suggested they eat together. He prepared a simple meal, pasta with tomato sauce, and Nira watched him with silent fascination. She had never eaten anything like it before. She tried it cautiously, tasting slowly, then smiling in a way that made him laugh. It was awkward, strange, yet profoundly human. He realized that sharing this meal, this ordinary act, made the world feel larger, yet smaller at the same time. They were two beings from completely different worlds, yet here they shared the same space. After dinner, Ethan showed her his small living room where the TV flickered with old science documentaries. Nira sat cross-legged on the rug, eyes wide as the images of galaxies and nebulae danced across the screen. "I remember these places," she whispered, almost to herself. "Far, far away. I have been there." Ethan leaned against the wall, watching her. "You've seen all that, and you came here, to my apartment." She turned to him, her expression unreadable yet tender. "I needed rest, but also I wanted to see you. You are different. You notice things others do not." The night deepened, and Ethan felt a strange heaviness settle in his chest. Fear had not gone away, but it had transformed into something else: wonder. The apartment, once a fortress of solitude, now felt alive with possibility. He realized he had been holding back for so long, guarding himself against the world, that he had almost forgotten how it felt to trust. "Do you ever get scared?" he asked hesitantly, sitting down beside her. Nira's eyes softened. "Yes, the universe is vast, sometimes lonely, sometimes cruel, but fear is temporary, connection lasts longer." Her words struck him deeply. Ethan had lived in fear of being hurt, of being alone, of the unknown. And yet here was something, or someone, who reminded him that the unknown could also bring wonder, companionship, even love. For hours they talked, or rather, she spoke and he listened. About stars, worlds, time beyond comprehension. About journeys that spanned lifetimes. Each story was impossible, yet he believed her because there was a purity to her words that made doubt feel small and irrelevant. By the time Ethan stood to stretch, he noticed the window open slightly. A breeze stirred the papers on his desk. He looked at Nira, and for the first time he realized something astonishing. He didn't feel fear, not really. He felt a fragile kind of trust, delicate and trembling, but real. She looked up at him and smiled faintly. Tomorrow I may leave, or I may stay. The universe is not always predictable. Ethan nodded, the truth sinking in. This night, this impossible encounter had changed him. He had opened his door literally and figuratively to something he had never dared to imagine. And for the first time in years, he felt the pulse of life, vibrant and unrestrained, coursing through him. He realized with a quiet, awe-filled shock that some encounters were meant to shift the course of a lifetime, and he had just lived one. The next morning, Ethan woke to a quiet apartment. The sun had barely risen, spilling pale light across the floorboards. Nira was already awake, standing by the window, her silver hair glowing faintly in the morning light. She seemed smaller somehow, more fragile. Watching her, Ethan felt a strange, protective instinct, as though the universe had placed something incredibly delicate into his care. "Morning," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. Nira turned slowly, her golden-flecked eyes meeting his. "Morning, human," she said, her voice carrying a hint of amusement but also a gentle seriousness. "You sleep well." Ethan nodded, brushing his hair back. "Better than I have in years, actually." He hesitated, then asked the question that had been gnawing at him since the night before. "Nira, why me? Why here?" She stepped closer, her movements fluid and graceful like water flowing over stones. "Because, you see, most humans are blind. They do not notice the small, the subtle, the beauty that exists in quiet corners. You notice." Her eyes softened. "That makes you rare." Ethan felt his chest tighten. Rare. That word aimed at him felt like both a compliment and a warning. He had spent his life unnoticed, blending into the background, and now somehow the universe had chosen him as a witness, chosen him as a home. "I'm not sure I deserve that," he admitted quietly, almost to himself. "I just live my life." Nira's expression turned gentle, almost sorrowful. "Living is not enough. Seeing, feeling, caring, that is what matters. And you do all of it without knowing." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. He felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that made his heartbeat quicken. He wanted to retreat behind his walls, to pull the locks tighter, to pretend this had all been a dream. But looking at her, he felt that for the first time in years, closing himself off would be unbearable. They ate breakfast together in silence, the clinking of spoons and cups filling the space between them. Ethan watched Nira as she examined the food, tasting small bites with cautious curiosity. The way she approached the simplest things, with wonder, with attention, made him see them anew. Even his plain toast seemed special when she looked at it with fascination. After breakfast, he asked, "Do you have to stay in one place, or can you just leave any time?" Nira's eyes darkened slightly. "I can leave, but leaving is not always easy. The bond remains. Even if I go, it lingers." She paused, looking down at her hands. "Sometimes leaving is lonely, even for travelers." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding more than he expected. He had lived alone, protected by solitude, but he knew now that loneliness could be both familiar and unbearable. "Then, you stay, as long as you need, but tell me what you need. I want to help." Her eyes lifted, meeting his, and for a moment the universe seemed to pause. "Help is connection, presence, attention. You give these naturally. That is why I stay." The day wore on, and Ethan began to feel the apartment transform. With Nira present, every shadow seemed alive, every corner full of possibility. The air felt charged with something he could not name, hope, wonder, maybe even destiny. He realized he had been waiting for something, though he had not known what. And now, standing in his own living room, he understood. Yet beneath the awe, a subtle unease lingered. He glanced at her, realizing he still knew almost nothing about where she had come from, what she truly was, or what dangers might follow her here. The uncertainty made him tense, and a question gnawed at the edges of his mind. "Nira, are you safe? And is this place safe for you?" She considered the question carefully, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I am safe while here, but the universe watches, not always kindly. My kind draws attention, sometimes unwanted." Her voice was quiet but serious. "This place, your home, it is unusual for me. It shields me, but I do not know how long it will hold." Ethan swallowed, feeling the weight of her words. The safety he had always taken for granted, the locks, the walls, the doors, suddenly seemed fragile. And yet, despite the fear creeping into his mind, he also felt a deeper courage rising. Somehow, he understood that protecting this being, sharing his world with her, mattered more than any comfort he had known. He reached out, placing his hand over hers. Her skin was cool, ethereal, yet it felt alive. "Then we'll face it together," he said quietly. "Whatever comes, we face it." Nira's eyes softened, a faint smile curving her lips. "Together," she repeated. The single word echoed in the apartment, small but powerful, like a promise. For the first time, Ethan realized that the door he had locked for so many years no longer symbolized isolation. Now it meant choice, connection, and perhaps a new beginning. The universe, vast and unknowable, had arrived at his doorstep in the form of a stranger from the stars. And for the first time, he felt ready. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Every shadow in his apartment seemed sharper, every creak in the floor louder. Nira slept quietly on the other side of the bed, her silver hair glowing faintly in the moonlight, but Ethan felt the weight of the unknown pressing against him. He had never been afraid of the dark before, but now, with someone truly alien under his roof, every sound carried a hidden meaning. He got out of bed and paced the room, trying to make sense of what had become his new reality. The rational part of him argued this was impossible. No one could just appear in your bed, no matter how gentle they seemed. Yet the rational part was silent when he looked at Nira sleeping, her breathing steady, her small chest rising and falling. He didn't want to wake her, not yet. Finally, he spoke softly, though she could not hear. "How do I protect you if someone comes, if someone knows you're here?" Nira stirred, blinking her golden-flecked eyes. "Do not worry, my presence is subtle," but her gaze became distant, thoughtful. "There are beings, hunters, some watch us, some seek, some wish to take what they cannot understand." Ethan froze, a chill running down his spine. "Take you? What do you mean?" She sat up slowly, hugging her knees to her chest. "Some beings cannot tolerate what is different. They see travelers as threats. I have escaped before, but I am weary." Her voice softened. "Here I feel safe with you." Ethan's heart tightened. The realization hit him with full force. This wasn't just an impossible encounter or a fantastical dream. There was danger, real danger, and somehow he had become responsible for keeping her safe. The thought was terrifying but strangely empowering. "Then we prepare," he said finally, his voice firmer than he expected. "We make sure no one can find you, and if they do, I'll fight, I'll protect you." Nira's eyes widened slightly, a mixture of awe and concern in her gaze. "You would do that, even though I am not of your world?" Ethan nodded. "You're here, you're alive, and that's enough for me. I can't explain it, I just can't leave you to face it alone." A silence fell between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Ethan realized that the strange bond forming between them was more than curiosity or wonder. It was trust. Dangerous, fragile, beautiful trust. He had never given so much of himself to anyone, and yet it felt natural. Right. Hours passed. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. Ethan and Nira spoke little, but the connection between them grew, wordless and unbroken. He watched her study the night sky through the window, her eyes reflecting distant stars. "Do you miss it?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Sometimes, the vastness, the freedom, but freedom without care is empty. Here I see care, I see connection, that is precious." Ethan swallowed, understanding more than she realized. He had always dreamt of the stars, of the unknown, yet he had never realized that what he truly craved was not adventure, but connection. The universe had delivered it in a form he never could have imagined. Then, without warning, the apartment trembled slightly, a vibration so faint it could have been dismissed as the building settling, but Ethan noticed. He saw Nira stiffen, her body tense. "They sense me," she whispered, fear threading her voice. "Not yet, but soon." Panic surged in him, sharp and immediate. "Who, what, how do we?" She placed a hand on his chest, stopping him. "Not yet, they are close, but not here. We must be patient, quiet, watchful." Ethan nodded, the adrenaline mingling with a strange exhilaration. For the first time, he felt like a participant in something larger than himself, something cosmic and terrifying, yet profoundly meaningful. This was no longer a story about loneliness or curiosity. This was survival, trust, and the fragile beauty of two worlds colliding. Hours turned into night. Ethan sat beside Nira, holding her hand. She leaned against him slightly, her warmth and faint glow anchoring him in ways he hadn't known he needed. Fear lingered at the edges of his mind, but so did awe. He realized that the universe, vast, indifferent, sometimes cruel, had delivered him a gift, and that gift was as fragile as it was extraordinary. He whispered into the darkness, a promise more than a thought. "I won't let anything hurt you, not while I'm here, not ever." Nira's eyes shone, brighter than the faint moonlight. "I believe you." And in that tiny apartment, amidst shadows and unknown dangers, Ethan understood something profound. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and sometimes terrifying. But it also gave moments of wonder, moments of trust, moments that could change a lifetime. He had opened his door, his home, his heart, and now he would fight to protect what mattered most. The next few days were a strange mixture of normal life and quiet tension. Ethan went to work, but his mind was never fully at the office. He replayed every detail of the night before, Nira's presence, her words, the subtle warning of unseen eyes. He felt both exhilaration and fear, the kind that makes the heart race and the stomach knot. Every sound outside his apartment, footsteps in the hall, a car door slamming, made him glance toward the door, half expecting a threat he couldn't define. Nira stayed mostly in his apartment, moving with a grace that seemed almost ethereal. She learned quickly how to navigate his world, how to pour tea without spilling, how to switch on lights without startling him, even how to read his books in silence. She asked questions, mostly about humans, and Ethan found himself answering honestly, more honestly than he had ever spoken to anyone. He realized that having her around was like having a mirror for his own soul. Her presence made him see himself more clearly. One evening, as he sat on the couch, he noticed her staring out the window again, her eyes fixed on the distant city lights. "What do you see?" he asked, gently. Nira didn't answer immediately. She shifted, turning to him slowly. "I see them," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "Hunters, not yet here, but they come. I feel it in the air. The universe is watching." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "Hunters." She nodded. "They do not understand. They take, they destroy, and sometimes they will not stop until they have me." The weight of her words settled between them. Ethan's chest tightened. He had never faced anything like this. It was no longer about curiosity or wonder. It was about protection, about survival, about standing between someone and the universe itself. "I'll protect you," he said firmly, his voice trembling slightly but carrying resolve. "No one's taking you, not while I'm here." Nira's eyes softened, but there was a shadow of worry in them. "I trust you, but the universe is vast, and even you may not be enough." Ethan swallowed, the enormity of the situation pressing on him. Yet alongside the fear, a spark of determination ignited. He realized that for the first time he was willing to step out of his ordinary life, to face dangers he could barely imagine because she mattered. She wasn't just a stranger or a visitor. She had become part of his world, part of his heart. The next evening, Ethan set up small precautions in the apartment. He checked the locks, rearranged the furniture to create clear lines of sight, even installed a simple camera by the door. Nira watched him with a mixture of curiosity and appreciation. "You are human, yet brave," she said softly. He smiled faintly. Maybe, I just don't know how to be anything else when you're here." Her gaze softened, a warmth passing through her eyes that made his chest ache. For a moment, the fear receded, replaced by something tender and unspoken. They were allies now, not just in survival, but in life. And in that bond, Ethan found a strength he had never known he possessed. Later that night, as they sat together on the couch, Ethan reached out, placing a hand over hers. "No matter what comes," he said quietly, "we face it together, always." Nira's eyes glimmered with an emotion he couldn't name. "I believe you," she whispered. Suddenly, a faint vibration ran through the apartment. Ethan's heart raced. Nira's hand tightened around his. "They are near," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, gripping her hand with both of his. "Then we wait, and we watch. Nothing happens without us being ready." The night stretched on, filled with tension and silence. Every creak of the floor, every distant siren felt amplified. But Ethan no longer felt helpless. He had someone beside him, someone he would protect with everything he had. And she had him, a human who could understand, care, and stand firm in the face of incomprehensible danger. For the first time, Ethan realized that life had shifted irrevocably. He was no longer just a man living alone. He was a guardian, a companion, someone entrusted with a being from the stars. And in that responsibility, in that connection, he discovered something extraordinary, that love, courage, and trust could bridge worlds, literally. As the night deepened, Ethan and Nira sat side by side, watching the city lights flicker below. Fear lingered at the edges of the room, but it was tempered by a bond stronger than any danger outside. The universe might be vast, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel, but together they had carved a small space of safety, wonder, and belonging. And in that space, Ethan realized they were unstoppable. The night was heavy with silence, the kind that made every sound sharp and every shadow seem alive. Ethan sat beside Nira on the couch, his hand resting lightly on hers. They had spent days preparing, fortifying the apartment, and learning each other's rhythms. Yet the unknown outside still pressed on them, a quiet but insistent reminder that their moment of peace could be shattered at any second. Nira's gaze lingered on him, her eyes reflecting the city lights. "You did not hesitate," she said softly, "even knowing the risk, even knowing the danger." Ethan looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. "I didn't hesitate because you're here. That's all that matters." His voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the depth of feeling he couldn't yet name. He had spent his life alone, guarding walls and locks, and now he realized he had been guarding the wrong things. The walls were not protection, they were a barrier to connection. And she had broken through, gently, impossibly, like starlight spilling into darkness. A sudden vibration ran through the apartment, sharper this time. Ethan's heart jumped. He glanced at Nira, whose eyes had grown wide with recognition. "They are here," she whispered, almost reverently. "The hunters, they have found me." Panic tried to rise, but Ethan pushed it down. He had no weapons, no reinforcements, only himself and the small universe they had carved together. And yet he felt something unfamiliar: courage. Raw, fierce courage that came from love, from connection, from knowing that he would not stand aside while the world threatened someone who mattered to him. "Then we face them," he said, his voice low but steady. "Together, no matter what." Nira nodded, a soft glow emanating from her skin as if her resolve fueled the very air around them. "Together," she repeated, the word echoing in the small room. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of waiting. Every sound, every flicker of movement outside made them tense, but nothing came in. And then, slowly, as the night deepened, Ethan began to notice something remarkable. The apartment, their small sanctuary, felt different. Not safer, not protected by walls or locks, but alive. Every breath, every heartbeat seemed in sync with Nira's presence. It was as if the universe itself had bent slightly toward them, acknowledging their bond. "I don't understand," Ethan said quietly. "Why haven't they come?" Nira tilted her head, her golden-flecked eyes thoughtful. "Perhaps because they see the bond, the connection. It is unusual, powerful. Sometimes even beings beyond your world respect it." Ethan stared at her, awe and disbelief mingling in his chest. He had always imagined the stars as distant, cold, and indifferent, but here was proof that connection, trust, and courage could ripple across galaxies, altering even the vast, indifferent universe. For a long moment, they sat in silence, hands intertwined, breathing together. Ethan realized that his life had been waiting for this impossible meeting, this fragile trust, this luminous being who had chosen him not out of necessity, but because he was worthy of being seen. "I never thought," Ethan began, his voice barely above a whisper, "that someone, something from another world could make me feel like this, whole, alive." Nira's smile was gentle, tender, and infinitely sad. "You are alive because you care, because you see, because you let me be." The words hung between them, simple and profound, echoing deeper than anything Ethan had ever known. For the first time, he understood that the universe, vast and unknowable, was not only dangerous and cold. It was also capable of beauty, of connection, of moments that could change the course of a life. Dawn began to creep over the horizon, spilling pale light through the blinds. Ethan looked at Nira, her silver hair glowing faintly in the morning sun. "Stay," he said softly, almost a plea. Stay as long as you want here with me. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the soft dawn. I will stay as long as we are together. And in that quiet apartment, amidst shadows and unknown dangers, Ethan realized something extraordinary. The universe had arrived at his doorstep in the form of a stranger from the stars. It had challenged him, frightened him, and demanded courage. But it had also given him something rare, fragile, and luminous: trust, connection, and the undeniable truth that he was no longer alone. For the first time in his life, Ethan understood the beauty of opening one's door, not just to the world, but to the impossible, the unknown, and the miraculous. He held Nira's hand a little tighter, feeling the warmth of her glow. Together, they would face the vast universe. Together, they had carved a small, shining world of their own. And for the first time, Ethan knew, truly knew, that he had found a place where he belonged. The stars outside were countless, cold, and distant. But here, in his apartment, light had found him.